everybody who's watching. This is Yonkers Voice. I am Adina Sood, along with the interview today, George Latimer. I'm going to call him George because he's everybody's George, as opposed to the fancy schmancy Westchester County Executive, yada, yada, yada. This is George. That's how he's going to be referred to for the rest of the interview. That being said, George, welcome to...
It's nice to be with you again.
Welcome to Yonkers Voice. And we got a bunch of questions from mine and also from the audience.
Sure.
I'd like to start out with the much touted Green Deal, climate change. Green Deal, both candidates, both yourself and your opponent, are promoting the Green Deal, which is good if you live in a more affluent zip code. You can afford the solar panels, you can afford the geothermal pumps, you can afford the air conditioners, all of that. But if you live in southwest side of Yonkers, the cost of an LED light bulb exceeds the cost of a tungsten bulb. So how do you promote the Green Deal in poorer areas?
Well, let's start out by saying, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you and to have these conversations. The Green New Deal is a proposed macro proposal for legislation at the federal government. It hasn't moved at all in these couple of years since it's been proposed. I think it's been out there for 3 terms of the Congress. And in it includes some of the things you're talking about. It has other elements of it too. The reality of it is for a number of reasons, and some of it is the cost for people who are poor. And, you know, I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon. My mom was a factory worker. My dad was a maintenance man. I lived in my parents' house even in the beginning of college because I was a commuter to college. So that neighborhood is indicative of Southwest Yonkers. It's indicative of parts of North Bronx, Wakefield section, and so forth. So I understand that scenario. In that scenario, you need federal resources, financial resources, not just policies that say this is what you're striving for, but you need financial resources to make these things possible. If what you want is more geothermal heating, if what you want is solar panels, or electric vehicles, all of those types of things. And right now the technology is more expensive to provide renewable energy than it is to have traditional fossil fuel-based things. So to pass a law is obviously a good thing. To set a goal, we're going to have 30% renewable, 100% renewable by 2030 and all these things. I hope I'm here in 2030 to see us hit these goals. But what's more important is to put financial resources behind it. And I'd say one other thing in general about the Green New Deal is a package. I support the package of that bill. But realistically, if it's not going to move, there's nothing to be gained by giving a speech about how important the Green New Deal is, and it doesn't move. We should take pieces of it out. If we think that homeowners in Wakefield, or the southwest corner of Yonkers, or the south side of Mount Vernon would benefit by having solar panels, then let's do a standalone effort to help finance that. And if we do that, and we actually get results, we actually get people who say, yes, I have the exposure, I could put this on my roof, and then I get the benefit of not paying Con Edison bills, which everybody would like the benefit of not having to pay Con Edison bills, then we're actually accomplishing something, as opposed to just saying, I'm for the Green New Deal, you want to pass it, but it's not moving forward. So you're correct in spotting that to be environmentally sensitive, if you want to call it that way, it's going to take money to bridge the money gap. And it's the money that's as important as the policy.
I think that there was an attempt through Sustainable Westchester was kind of crashed and burned because the energy costs energy savings rather, they had promised did not manifest. If anything, a lot of homeowners ended up paying more than they would have with Con Ed. So would there be more programs like that going forward that are economically feasible where people can actually save money?
Well, realistically, as county executive today, I have responsibility for trying to figure out how to deal with that issue on a practical level in Westchester County. And there are strategies to be used with different communities. The smaller urbanized communities, the Tuckahoes, the Port Chesters of the world, and then outside of this congressional district, the Oslings of the world. We have worked through the federal government to create a community development block program. We established an urban county consortium. That's a way to access money to help do the things we're talking about in those communities. For the bigger communities, Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, they have their own CDBG money allocated. As a county executive, my job would be to work with the smaller communities communities within the county structure. If I'm a federal official, my job is to fund the program, to go to bat and fund the program. And remember the difference, and I've been a legislator, a state legislator, as a state assemblyman, a state senator. I voted for raising the minimum wage. I voted for banning assault weapons in personal use. I voted for marriage equality, all these things as a state legislator. You go to Washington and you vote for those macro policies. But if you want to help people on the south side of Mount Vernon, you have to put money behind it. So I go back to that basic argument that most of what I think you need to do as a Congress member is not what you advocate for or what you give a speech about. And it could be a passionate speech. It can move everybody in the room. But unless you can figure out how to get the dollars and cents behind it, and that's the problem right now with energy costs. Energy costs are rising, and you need an economic bridge for the people that just can't pay those bills. And that has to come, in general, from the federal government. The local governments, the city of Mount Vernon does not have the money to bridge that gap. The county of Westchester does. We can do a little bit of it. That's the free buses. We can do a little bit. But the major things have to come from the federal government, and you have to focus laser-like on what does it take to build a coalition, a broad-based coalition. You just can't hang out with the cool kids. You got to figure out how to get people in your party, and you have to work across the aisle. I know some folks don't want to hear that, but you got to work across the aisle to get consensus. And then that's the best way to work at solving these problems. I hope it's something that you can point to results in a 2-year, 4-year time frame, but I think it's going to take time.
You spoke about your role as Westchester County Executive and your potential role as Congressperson. What is the distinction between the two roles? Because people, should you become Congressman, people might expect you to do the same things that you did as Westchester County Executive. So I think it's important to describe to the
Sure.
audience the change of roles.
Well, the first thing is, if you look at my overall public career, and I had a private career, I made the commitment to go into this line of work as a profession in my late 40s, which is analogous to my opponent's decisions as well. Now, because I've had another 20-some-odd years since then, I've been committed to my public role. In the public role, a legislator and an executive are two different functions. As a county executive for these 6.5 years, I have executive authority, which is disproportionate ability to allocate resources for the county. It's not a dictatorship. I work through the board of legislators, and legislators who represent the local communities, the Tyree Woodson Samuels and the Shanae Williamses and the David Tubiolos, have a role to play in this decision making. A legislator, which I was for 13 years in Albany, alongside Andrea Stewart Cousins and Gary Pretlow and those folks, we advocate and we fight to put money in budgets, and that's what you do when you're in Washington. When you're in a position as I had as an executive, I'm not going to be president of the United States, so I'm not going to have the ability to direct how those resources go. But as a legislator, while you don't have the executive authority, you have to know what moves the executive. As an executive today, if you're a legislator and you come into me, as Jose Alvarado has come into me, says, George, let me show you the need for this project in Southwest Yonkers. Let me show you the economic importance of it. Let me show you the cost factors that are involved. That's persuasive. And then we're able to make the decision, yes, we'll get behind this program. Flip it around. I become the legislator in Washington. Now I have to make a strong case, not just to the President of the United States. Those decisions are made much further down in the bureaucracy. If you want money to get affordable housing for the poorest of people in those places where you need it, you're going into Housing and Urban Development, HUD, Region 3, based in New York City, and you're talking to the regional administrator and probably the assistant regional administrator and the third assistant, somebody for housing outside of the city, and you're going in with facts and figures to make that argument. You're not making a speech. And because you've been television at a very, very high level, it takes a certain type of issue to warrant television coverage. Going into a meeting to talk about how money needs to be channeled to renovate a public housing project does not make the media attention. But that's where the decision is. So you shift from being an executive to a legislator, you shift your mindset. I now have to be the same kind of persuasive person that I was in my Albany days and in my county legislative days to try to get money back for the 16th Congressional District.
And you talked about affordable housing. Affordable housing does garner a lot of media attention. Yonkers needs more affordable housing. I think it's something that is across the boards, but there's a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard. So Governor Hochul lost her bid to have an affordable housing mandate throughout New York State. Does this mean that that would be revisited when you become a congressperson and we would see a mandate for affordable housing in the more affluent sections of Westchester, the more affluent sections being Scarsdale, the more affluent sections being not Chappaqua, but Newcastle?
Well, there's a lot of affluent sections, so.
A lot of affluent sections. I know that Mamaroneck has its own debate right now.
Well, that's on one
affordable housing.
project. Let me step back and take a larger view. When you go to Congress, you're not dealing with what Governor Hochul is doing. That's a state legislative function and structure. And then what the County of Westchester does that I have been doing, the accomplishments that we've had. We have built 2,500, we've incented the creation of 2,500 units of affordable housing. We have another 4,000 in the pipeline. We just voted on a bill earlier this year for a project in Yonkers of so many units. I think it was about 70 units, 90 units. And we had a similar vote for one in Ossining of the same type. Right now, in the town of Mamaroneck, we're setting aside $3 million for the development of a project there. It's a Village of Mamaroneck project that's controversial, but we're working with the town of Mamaroneck for a project that happens there. And that's the localized, the county level situation. Here's the key. The county government and the state government have resources to allocate for affordable housing. We can help reduce the expense of a building so that you can reach people who are 50% of average median income, maybe 60% of average median income. Normally, market rate $3,000 for one-bedroom apartment, that's over the moon. If you can get that number down to 1,800 or 1,600, you're helping people in that range. But the poorest of people can't be helped by that. That's where you need federal assistance. And that's where you need Section 8 assistance. Because the Section 8 program, created back in the 1970s, I was involved in administering it as a kid in Mount Vernon for 2 years in the planning department. I was 23, 24 years old, and I was the administrator of the program. I was fresh out of graduate school.
Section 8, a lot of people put their
Well,
hair on fire.
they think something else with it. But the bottom line is, in Section 8, the subsidy follows the individual tenant. When you're poor, when you have only SSI benefits, or you're living on Social Security, your income is so low that there's no way that county and state money can get the cost of the unit down to what you have to pay. You need Section 8 assistance for you, the tenant. And that's the difference between pushing for federal money versus what happens in state and county money. Let me answer the question relative to Governor Hochul. Governor Hochul had a program. Most programs in state government do not pass the first year. It didn't pass a year ago. Now she came back with a revised program that passed. Andre Stewart-Cousins, Carl Hasty, the two leaders of the units went along with this revised program, which is an incentivized program. We've built affordable housing in affluent communities in Westchester County. Lewisboro, we just opened up 42 units of affordable housing within the last year. And those things are very important to understand. So this perception that it's NIMBY that keeps them out is not as accurate as the money problem. The money problem is the problem. We have to have subsidy in order to get the units affordable so that people can afford it.
Just going to break for 10 seconds to give not a promo, but a commercial for Dos Marias. We are coming to you live from Dos Marias, which is in downtown Yonkers. The food is fantastic. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Folks, you got to patronize our local business. These people work very, very hard. This is a colorful place. It's easy parking. It's convenient. The food has a very varied menu. You're going to like it. Come down to Dos Marias. Come bien y goza bien. And there you have it. Dos Marias restaurant. Now we're talking about, not Dos Marias, we're talking about a million Marias questions here. We're talking a lot about the federal government and money. A lot of money is being spent now on migrants that are coming into Westchester County. Right now we've got, I believe, 4 shelters? We have 3 shelters, which is probably a total of roughly 1,200 people?
No, about 450 people.
Okay, but you've got 250 in Yonkers, you've got another...
It's about the same. I can tell you the numbers.
Okay, yeah.
You have a site, Ramada Plaza, it's Speranza Plaza off of Tuckahoe Road. That is about half of the total allocation of people, so it's in the high 200 range, short of 300. You have a smaller unit in Ardsley Acres Motel off of 9A in Ardsley, and then you have one at the Central Motor Courtyard off of Central Avenue in White Plains. Those are the 3 migrant placements that came from the Adams administration out of New York City. New York City government is paying for the overnight accommodations and the base food for the migrants in those 3 locations. And as we're sitting here talking now in April, we're just about a year in duration that these 3 placements have been. There are many more placements in other parts of New York City, and that has all happened because there's a problem at the border, and the Texas governor made the decision to put people on buses. He didn't spread them out across the nation. He sent them to New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, sent some to Martha's Vineyard, because he was making a political statement. He wanted to go to the cities that were identified as being progressive, liberal cities to make a point, as opposed to knowing that some of the need for migrant workforce is in the agricultural states. But the agricultural states, they lean more conservative, they don't want them, and so the Texas governor didn't do that. So right now, we're responding as Westchester County with a number. It's under 500, it's probably 450 depending on the number of children that are involved. And we've managed it over the course of these 12 months. There have been some incidents, but no major crimes, and very importantly, there's been no outbreak in diseases. And all of these were things that were argued. This is not the way to handle the migrant issue. We're just responding humanitarianly in the best way we can. But there needs to be a macro overhaul of our immigration program. That's got to come with the federal government. There was an effort made to have that discussion bipartisanly in the Senate, and you saw it got kind of sunk because Donald Trump didn't like the idea of having a negotiation. There's a presidential race at hand, and he has a plan. I think it's called the Big Beautiful Wall Plan. And if he becomes president, that's what he wants to do, and he doesn't want any other plan in the meantime. My sense of it is the system for immigration is broken. It needs to be fixed. There does need to be more border security. I don't know if there needs to be a wall, but there needs to be border security. But you also have to have a work program for these people who do come in and want to work, so they can work in a legal way and not in the underground economy, which is what happens when they're living in a hotel room for a year. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah, that's not a way for people to live. And all of this has to be worked out. I called, when these migrant placements occurred, I called for the federal government to establish an immigration court in White Plains, where we have a U.S. District Courthouse. Put an immigration court there, so the people who were placed here would have their cases adjudicated. Crickets. Nothing. No response. And if you did that, then you could start to move people through the program, as opposed to this sitting there and living the end of year 1, proposed to living in year 2 in a motel setting, which is not accurate. So you need a program that deals with immigration. Most of the people that want to come into the United States are living in impossible conditions in Latin America. Some of them are coming from other countries to the southern border to use that as the entryway. But the United States does not have the resources to say everybody who wants to come in, just all come in and it'll all work out. It has to be managed, and it has to be dealt with in an intelligent, thoughtful way.
But is there a mechanism to put a cap on how many migrants this district, Westchester County, can absorb?
Well, there's no legal cap that's created anywhere in the nation. The federal government right now sets the policies and the laws for immigration. The state doesn't, the city of New York doesn't, county of Westchester doesn't,
so
city of Yonkers doesn't.
We could get more.
Anything could happen. It could happen any which way. To project the worst case scenario, yeah, and there could be a different scenario that could be projected. You must deal with the problem at its root. Its root cause is our immigration policy and our laws. And I'll give you just one example. The policies say you have to wait 6 months before you can get a work waiver. Why? That doesn't make sense to me. But you're not going to fix that in and of itself. And as you know, because you follow this, you're very, very astute to this, the Republicans in Congress have been unwilling to negotiate any plans unless they get the wall. Their policies, I want the wall. I want you to build this wall all across the border. If you've seen the Rio Grande River, the Rio Grande Rio doesn't need a border. It needs patrols, but you're building a wall across a rocky hillside valley that leads into a river. So the argument is more for political purposes. And if I can generalize, if you permit me to do this, this is the biggest problem with Washington today. Everything has turned into an ideological food fight. It's the far right and the far left arguing over culture wars, instead of trying to solve the problems that you see every day. Solving the problems and the strategies to solve the problems is boring. I admit it. When I talk to friends of mine over a beer, when we're not talking about the Knicks or the Rangers, and I start to say, well, you know, the affordable housing problem requires money that has been... It's not interesting. What's interesting are the food fights, the fist fights between the far right and the far left. But you're not solving problems in Washington by doing that. You get into an argument on the steps of the Capitol, and you shout out on this guy who you know wants unlimited guns, and you want guns. You're not solving anything with that argument. You're just having a street argument.
It's theatrics, basically.
It's theatrics. And what it does do is it does get the attention of the media, no offense to you, but it gets the attention of the media. And then people say, oh, I heard you arguing from my point of view. Yeah, but what solves the problem? What solves the problem, back to immigration, is to sit down and hammer out a plan that includes border security, it includes work provisions, it includes a whole new structure of the asylum program. It involves whatever path to citizenship is appropriate over what length of time. That's what you need.
And Ben has
Yeah,
some questions from
yes.
the audience.
Mr. Latimer, we have a question here from somebody who's emailed us, and this is the question. Congress Beaumont and Democratic Socialist Party have put out a narrative that attempts to paint you as a white old part of the establishment and kind out of it. What is your response in regards to this?
Well, I think the proof of the pudding is in how I've formed an office. It is not debatable that I'm white. The fact that I grew up on the south side of Mount Vernon, the only white kid in a black neighborhood, and lived in Mount Vernon for the first 25 years of my life, it didn't make me black, but it doesn't make me, you know, an old white man who lives in Beverly Hills and never interacted with the diversity of our society. I have. The fact that I'm old is provable. I was born in 1953, so the math is obvious. But my energy, my drive, the willingness that I have to go out and reach out into these communities every day. I'm in one of these communities in this county, not just in this congressional district, and on a range of issues. We have launched a black maternal health care initiative, $1 million or multiplied a year over 3 to 4 years. It'll be a $5 million program. That doesn't bespeak of an old white man's policy. That speaks of a pragmatic policy to try to get better outcomes for black mothers and children. We've been able to make the buses free. Now, a lot of folks in this county, you mentioned affluent communities, they don't ride the buses. The people who do ride the buses, and I remember, when I was a kid, I didn't have a car, I had to ride buses. For those people who are going to work every day, or who are using the buses to get to the medical office, or to go shopping, we've made them free over the summertime, and that comes not out of my being old or white, it comes out of my understanding the need that people have for public transportation that's reachable for the public. I could go through a lot of these things. So to the extent that there is a narrative, sure, it's a political campaign. Somebody wants to put you in the worst possible light. But I've been a county executive for 6.5 years. I've been in the state legislature before that. I think a lot of people in Westchester know who I am. If at the end of the day, you're going to vote for a candidate based on their race or their age, what can I say? You'll vote for your reasons. But what I'm trying to project in this race is not my demographics, but my ideas, the drive and the determination that I have, and my understanding of the legislative process. Because it's through the legislative process that you accomplish things, not in the speeches you give. I know I'm giving one now, but it's not in the speeches. It's in what you do when you have authority. And if you look at the authority that we've had, we rebuilt Memorial Field. We rebuilt Sprain Ridge pools that laid empty for 7 years. We built a proper New Rochelle family court for people going for the family court in New Rochelle. Those are the things that we've accomplished. That matters more than my age, and it matters more than what the color of my skin is.
Race and ethnicity.
Let me just one more, and then we can go back. Congressman Beaumont also says that the campaign against him is exclusively about Israel, Palestine, Gaza. What is your response to this claim?
Well, I don't think that's accurate at all. That would be his perception of it. This campaign is about, in my judgment, and I'm the candidate that's the alternative candidate in the race, this is a choice for Democratic voters. The Democratic voters who go on June 25th to the polls, they vote early, they have a choice. He has established over his term in office the way he does his job, what he does, what he prioritizes, and all of those things. I offer a different alternative. My alternative is based on what I've done in public office, what I've done as a legislator, and what I have done as an executive. And I think this campaign is about who can help make your life better, who can really deliver on affordable housing, who can really deliver on job growth and development, who can really deliver on better transportation and climate change and environmental things, which you talked about at the outset. Who can articulate how you protect a woman's right to choose? Who can articulate the rights for all different groups? That includes folks who are black. It also includes people who are Latino. It also includes people who are Asian. It includes people who are LGBTQ. It includes people who are old as well as people who are young. It's a universal situation. Those are the reasons why I'm in this race. Whatever he feels about why he's being opposed is his point of view, but it's not why I'm in the race. And if you watch the things I've said, you watch the videos I've put out, I haven't talked that much about Mr. Bowman's record. I've talked about what I believe I could do if I were your congressman.
But what is your position in regards to what's going on in the Middle East?
Well, I'm happy to address that.
Can you?
Of course, yeah. But I just want to be clear. That to me is not the issue of the race. That may be his position. That's not my position.
But what is
Well, I'm going to share it with you. You have a long-term conflict in the Middle East. It goes back before what happened in 1948 with the creation of the State of Israel. But Israel was created in 1948. It was recognized by the United States. It is a nation of people that have been long in diaspora. They have come back to their traditional land, and they have formed a nation for the last 75 years. They have a right to exist as a nation, and they have a right to exist under defensible borders. However, I believe in a two-state solution. I do believe that there should be a viable state that exists alongside of it, for which those people who identify themselves as Palestinians can live in. This has been a very hard thing to get to, because the animosities and the conflicts go back generations. Now, what happened most recently on October 7th was a horrific terrorist attack by Hamas. And it cannot be denied that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I hear rhetoric to the opposite of that. People say, oh no, they're just freedom fighters. What they did that day was horrific. And people who have said, oh, it wasn't that bad, they've had to walk all that narrative back, because the proof of the pudding has been that there were terrible things done that I didn't want to articulate what they are, because they were horrible things to women, horrible things across the board. So my sense of it is, if you want a cessation of military action, you release the hostages or the remains of the hostages. I'm not sure these people are alive anymore. I think they've probably been terminated. But you must give people closure. I know when I lost my mom and dad, it's terrible, but you have to have the closure. You have to have the closure of giving them a proper burial and a proper sense of that. You must make that part. Hamas has not talked about doing that. And that's an essential part of a peace process. And you also have to step away from this commitment to violence. They have every reason to expect Israel to stop bombing Gaza, but they have to show as well that they too will step back from violence. It can't be a one-way street, because what happened on October 7th began with hang gliders coming into a kibbutz, opening a gate, terrorists coming in, murdering people indiscriminately. And you can't forget about that. You can't say, well, there's other things that have happened since then. That's what triggered these actions. My position on Israel, I think, is very clear. And that is why I've been supported by the groups I've been supporting. But it is not opposition to the Muslim community. It is not opposition to there being a peaceful settlement. But I also think it's a practical response to what's happened that day, not a theoretical response. And what you're watching now are people who say, well, you should do this and then there'll be peace. It's going to take a long, hard road to get to peace. And you have to have people negotiating it who have some confidence in each other. And you're not there at this point.
Your opponent has been very strident about your alleged acceptance of monies from MAGA and your alleged acceptance of monies from AIPAC. I say alleged because I don't have the tally sheets right in front of me. But if that is in fact true, do you feel that you have to defend that?
Well, I'm going to explain, how I respond to the charge. First of all, I've been an incumbent in other elections. And in those elections when I was an incumbent, I didn't even mention the name of my opponent. I ran on my record. I said, this is what I've accomplished. This is why I'd like you to vote for me. I'm a bit surprised that the incumbent determines that his best path to getting reelected is to all out attack me and call me genocide George and all this other stuff. That's a sign, I think, that they lack the confidence to be able to say, this is what I've accomplished in this term of office, and that's sufficient for elections. We've got to attack them. In terms of where I've gotten money from, I've raised about $3.3 million. He's raised about $2.3 million. I've gotten significantly more than half of my money has been raised from people in Westchester and the Bronx. Well over half, 60%. I don't know the exact number. It's higher than the last filing. It's a little bit lowered a little bit. Somewhere, I think it's in the 60% range. 90% of his money has come from outside of Westchester and the Bronx. 90%. It comes from a nationwide network of people. He wants you to say, well, George has money from this group, and therefore he's owned by them, when he, in fact, has most of his money coming from people in California. That's the single biggest state that's generated money for him. I'm not attacking him on his sources of money. I'm just responding to what's fair and what's right. The people who have donated to me, some of them are affiliated with AIPAC, and some of them may be Republicans. But if you look at my race, they're easy to find. It's on New York State Board of Elections. All the other elections I've run have been under New York State, and look at all the people who've ever donated to me. I've always gotten support from Democrats and Republicans. When I first ran for the city council in Rye a long time ago, when I first ran for my county legislative seat a long time ago, I was running in Republican areas. I couldn't have won without crossover vote, and I wouldn't have been successful without crossover financing. So people who are otherwise Republicans have liked the fact that I'm bipartisan, and they've supported me, and that's how I've run all the way up to now. The attack about MAGA is completely bogus. And let me give you the specific example. They point to a fundraiser in Larchmont that happened 2 months ago. The fundraiser was sponsored by a woman, a friend of mine, a beautiful home in Larchmont. She said, I want to bring some of my friends over, have a fundraiser for you. Thank you very much, we'd love to do it. The event happens, there's 50 people in attendance. I know who most of the people are local Democratic district leaders, local Democratic officials, other people, maybe another 10 or 12 people I didn't know. A couple of them might have been Republican. Her husband is a Republican who has donated to Republican campaigns. She's donated to Democratic campaigns, Hillary Clinton, Kathy Hochul. They pounce on the husband's presence. He was there. His wife, this is his wife's sponsor. They say Pam and Jim and whatever the two names are. But they pounce on his affiliation and they say, oh, this is a MAGA fundraiser of MAGA friends of George Latimer. It's a lie. It's a purposeful lie, and you need to understand that. It's a purposeful lie because my record has been progressive, and the people who want to try to paint me as old, white, conservative, they recognize if you know the truth, if you know what my record is, if you know what I've done, you don't have the argument. You don't have that argument. I'm energetic, and I've accomplished a lot of things that are very progressive. But you need the argument a certain way. So you call it MAGA and it's not MAGA. And you repeat it because you think it's going to matter to people. Under normal circumstances, I'd be even more agitated. Well, why am I not agitated? Because people know me. I've been around. I've been in and out of things. Here in Yonkers, I know people will hear this. They may see this a couple of days later. Last night, I went to the Yonkers PTA event fundraiser. And I saw people. They honored Robin Brunfeld, my friend Karen Beltran, who used to be the head of it. She's now a judge. I've known these people for 15, 20 years. I went from there over to the Yonkers Library Gala. Now I know the president was in town, and I think my opponent was with the president, but I'm with the Yonkers Library Group. Then I went to a meeting in Wakefield. Then I went to a meeting in Greenburgh. I'm pretty tired by the end of the night. But the point is that I'm in the community all the time. And the people of Westchester, the Bronx doesn't know me that well. The people of Westchester know that. So these arguments are made, MAGA, and where you're getting your money from, they're made to try to change a narrative. But the narrative is what it is. I am who I am, he is who he is, we have a choice.
We have a comment here from somebody you know, Carol Conklin. Carol says, she has spoken to you many times and she's grateful for the things that you have done for people with disabilities. She wants to know, if you are elected as a congressman, what would you do in addition to what you've been doing so far?
Well, I think what you try to do, first of all, is if I go in as a freshman congressman, I'm not going to have the George Latimer plan for climate change to pass, or the George Latimer plan for disabilities. You look at all the existing legislation that we have, and Carol and people like her from the disability advocacy community, and you can apply this in every other way. You can apply this to the Latino community, you can apply this to the LGBTQ community, you can apply this to the African American community. You look at what's the existing legislation, and then you meet with the advocates in the community. You say, here are the 10 or 20 bills that exist already. This is happening in January of next year. Which of these bills are the most important to you in the advocacy community? Let me sign on as a co-sponsor and help. Before I sponsor a bill, you have to know what existing bills are there and what are the chances of success. If I go to Washington and I'm part of a Democratic House majority, that's one good thing. If I'm part of a minority, well, that's more difficult. And the incumbent has been one-term majority, one-term minority, and we'll see what this term represents. But to Carol and other people in the disability community, there are questions of legal policy changes that open up the door for financial assistance. There are policy changes that require when things are constructed, that they're constructed with disabilities in mind. Now, they had the ADA Act of 1990, which was a major law, but there were modifications to that law that you need to look at and review. So my commitment to Carol and people in the disability community is to analyze as quickly as I can with the staff that we put together all of the existing proposed legislation in this area of policy, meet with the advocacy committee, discuss these policies, determine which of these bills represent a worthy of co-sponsorship, and then determine, is there a gap? Is there a gap? And that's where you sponsor a bill. And then when you sponsor a bill, it's not enough to sponsor the bill through a press conference. You got to get co-sponsors. And I have to develop relationships, day one, with other legislators to be able to go to Congresswoman, Congressman, Congressman, and Congresswoman and say, I've got this bill on disability. You know, let me explain to you why I think it's a good idea for you to get on it, so that we have 5, 10, 15 sponsors for a bill.
You gotta be able to schmooze. You gotta be on schmooze patrol.
Well, it's schmooze, but it's also, it's one part schmooze, because you're all probably having coffee or a drink, but it's also content. It's knowing the content of the bill, because you're not only doing this out of friendship, you're doing this out of appreciation of their policy and their intellect, and you have to respect their intellect and show them on the level of merit. So you would say, George, that's a good bill, I could support that, or George, I disagree with this for these reasons, and you work it out. And that's what I would do. And I think that's a practical way to do it. It's exactly what I did in the Assembly. It's exactly what I did in the State Senate.
I'd like to change venue for a second, because you have Co-op City in your district. There is a law called the L-97 law, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is the law which is mandated by the New York City Council, where any building, particularly co-ops that are 25,000 square feet or more, have to, by law now, retrofit their boilers, their windows. They basically have to make their buildings green. What this has done is that it has put a lot of co-ops in a position to go bankrupt, because the money has to come from somewhere. That means that maintenance is going to be increased. Your maintenance can go up 10%, 20%, 30%. They just don't know at this point. And buildings have tried to get loans. They've tried to ask for extensions. In some places it's happening, other places it's not. So your opponent did say that based on a refinancing process that happened in Co-op City, which he helped to navigate, that they have already fulfilled that obligation. Research seems to show that they have not fulfilled that obligation, and these Co-op City is massive. I believe there's like 45,000 residents.
Right.
That can mean that a good percentage of those people would have to give up their homes because they cannot afford the climate change, Green Deal induced retrograde on their buildings.
You're exactly right. It's a New York City law, and the federal government has not fulfilled the obligation. It's unfortunate that you misrepresent. He misrepresents where we are. The first thing you need is you need a waiver that's timed, so that you don't reverse the law, but you say, we give a waiver to Co-op City for these reasons, and you make it, you look at the specifics of it. Co-op City has its own energy generation plan.
A cogeneration plan, right?
Most co-ops don't have that. So you create a waiver, an amendment to the law that says for those complexes that have a cogeneration plan, the implementation of this program shall be delayed by 2 years. Why? Because that gives you a chance to look at what capital might be involved in the cogeneration plant that could solve your need, rather than making the individual shareholders pay for that through their carrying charges. And right now, they've just had an 8% proposed 8% increase in carrying charges. Now, credit State Senator Jamal Bailey and Assemblyman Michael Benedetto, who have, in Albany, in this budget, reduced what that would be with some additional state money. I don't know the exact numbers, but it reduces that number down. And at the federal level, if you are able to craft, I go back to money again, I hate to say it, but you go back to money again to try to be able to ameliorate some of that. But there's also a bigger structural problem for which this is just one part of. When I've had a chance to look, and I'm at the beginning stages, you must remember, Co-op City was announced as being part of this congressional district 60 days ago. And prior to that, you know, as a candidate for the seat, you don't know that you have co-op, so you study what you have, and then you now open up studying on the areas you don't have. And I've been in co-op at meetings. We need to have a meeting on the overall financial structure of co-op, because it over the long term is not going to be sustainable on this and a host of other things. And this mandate is part of that problem. But I'll tell you another problem they have, and it's a concurrent problem, and that's the problem of insurance. Co-op City has to go to the private insurance market to be insured. Most entities the size of Co-op City are self-insured. Westchester County is self-insured. What does that mean? Well, we don't pay premiums that would be $1 million plus, with deductibles that probably mean most claims are going to wind up being paid outside of the insurance company structure. We need to be able to create a new insurance structure for that. It probably takes law. I think it probably takes state law to do it. But there'd have to be some pool of money to collateralize the potential obligations. And there's, you're probably going to need federal money along with state
What
money
can you
to
do
that.
for those 45,000 people? What can you tell
Well,
them?
this is what I'm telling you. We need to have a state, federal, and city partnership that would delay the implementation of L-97 and at the same time create special arrangements that would help co-op deal with some of the problems that are unique to Co-op City. It's a unique facility. And if we can accomplish those things, that will give them breathing space to be able to figure out how these things can be implemented. But again, it's not accomplished in speech. It's not accomplished by being outraged, by saying, we need to do this, and we've been looked down upon. That doesn't solve it. What solves it is understanding the guts of the problem. And the guts of the problem is that the economy now, with the rising cost of energy, is making it unsustainable to have an existing affordable housing complex. That's what Co-op City is. It's existing affordable housing, and it's becoming unaffordable with each passing day. As a congressman, I put my shoulder to the wheel. And as I've said already, I've credited Senator Bailey and Assemblyman Benedetto on this. Let me also credit Councilman Kevin Riley, who has been a strong voice on this. He needs other voices in the Bronx to help him. Hopefully, Councilman Eric Dinowitz is also supportive of this. And then you create a situation where you deal with the mayor, Mayor Adams. I've had a good relationship with him over the migrant issue. And you say, Mr. Mayor, we need your administration's support to do this for Co-op City. And in return, we in the federal and state government will do that. And then you start to lift some of the pressure that's on a Co-op City resident.
The old mantra, crime and punishment. People are feeling unsafe in their neighborhoods now. Their cars are getting ripped off, catalytic converter thefts. It's just rampant in the city. A lot has to do with just a very liberal perspective of crime. We're talking about bail reform, we're talking about police being held responsible, micromanaged. So how do you make people feel safe in their neighborhoods without abridging the rights of the average citizen?
Well, I can tell you what we've done in Westchester County. The first thing is that we make no bones about it. We fully fund the Westchester County Police Department. We know that the reforms are needed in policing. We've instituted some of them in Westchester by having a mental health crisis response team. And we're still working on the very complicated elements of civilian involvement and review of behavior. But we've done a lot of other implementations. We had a committee formed headed by Leroy Frazier and Mayo Bartlett in Westchester. And now Leroy Frazier is head of our police advisory board. And he's an African-American lawyer, prosecutor by profession, worked in both the Brooklyn and the Manhattan District Attorney's offices. Mayo Bartlett is a prominent public defender, amongst other things, a public defender, but a private practice defending individuals. And they both helped create a very substantive report, most of which we've implemented. But by putting money behind the policing, it's not just policing and here's money and go out there and crack guys over the head. It's improve education, diversify your police force so that you have a greater number of women, people of color, and Latinos, Spanish-speaking elements in it, and we're in the process of trying to implement all those things. When I've been in the Bronx, 47th and 45th precinct are the two precincts that involve the two Bronx sections. They're much bigger than Co-op and Wakefield, but they cover those areas as well. I've seen a good on-the-ground relationship between NYPD and the local people in that community. And that is the basis upon which you build a better, safer community. And I would say the macro concern about crime is there, but compared to any other complex of its size, Co-op City has done a better job of keeping the criminal realities down. We've had a reduction in violent crime in Westchester, but property crimes are there. And property crimes are there because we are, and this is true of the Bronx as well as it is in Westchester, we're in the middle of a corridor where somebody can come out of Bridgeport with a car theft ring, come over the border, steal a car, and go right back over state border, or go right back over state border in New Jersey. And that makes it tougher for local police because you can't pursue into the state of Connecticut and the state of New Jersey. So we rely on these police professionals to work together interjurisdictionally and try to help those things. In terms of the more general policies you talked about, those are state policies. Were I back in the state legislature, I'd be dealing with, how do we deal with some of those policies? But I'm not, and I want to stay focused on what I can do at the federal level. And at the federal level, those policies include having a stronger presence in gun control, because many of the crimes that we see happen because of the proliferation of guns. Now you can make guns through a 3D printer. I don't even know how that works, to be honest with you. But they're ghost guns, and there's no registry on it. And the guns on the street makes us all unsafe. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, and there were moments at which you'd have a beef with somebody, but nobody had a gun to pull out of their waistband. And if you have a gun to pull out of the waistband, you end the beef with a dead body on the street, as opposed to what boys will do, which is cuff around. I was never good at that, but I had a couple of experiences.
Oh, I think you could hold your own in the
well,
throwdown.
if you're my age, yeah, I'll take you on. No, in all seriousness, those are the concerns that I have. And again, from the federal government level, it's a coordination of services. What the federal government has that the local governments don't have is interstate investigative authority. And that has to be brought in from the federal government to assist the local police if you're going to break up a car theft ring, if you're going to break up a catalytic converter ring. Because one guy doesn't decide to steal a catalytic converter. He's part of a group of people because they know where they can market the catalytic converter. A guy just steals it and sticks it in his apartment. He doesn't know how to get rid of it, move it for profit. It's part of a ring. The rings have to be broken up using federal assistance to the local officials.
A question here from another member. When you were elected the first time, you spoke a lot about the homeless issue. I'm sure that you have done a lot, but if we have to judge by what we see in Yonkers, we would say that not much has been done. We still see the same amount, more or less, same exposure of homeless. What are you doing, what you've been doing, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, as a county official, it's the county responsibility to provide homeless accommodations overnight. But keep in mind that our ability to take the homeless off the street is limited by what the courts have interpreted as the right of the individual. If I see somebody sleeping in a doorway and I call the DSS department or the county mental health or what have you, we cannot physically take this person up and put them in a homeless shelter. We make homeless shelters available so that a person can have shelter overnight, but unless the temperature drops below a certain level in the heart of the winter, code blue, and then we have the legal authority to take them off the street because they will die on the street if they spend the night on the street in sub-freezing weather. So the problem we have, as I view it, more macro in homeless, is that we have laws that do not allow us as a county government to be able to say this person is suffering not just from homelessness, but has mental illness issues, has drug addiction issues. They must be put into a treatment program. It cannot be at their option, because at their option, they'd rather sleep on the street. And that is why you see this perpetual homelessness. And then they say, well, what's somebody doing about it? The policy is that that individual has free right, and I cannot take him and put him in a shelter off the street and then say, well, this person needs medical, you must take your meds, we're going to force feed you the medicines. This is more of a question of policies at the state level, where they have to determine if there's a different strategy that will allow us to deal with the homeless. And the homeless people, as I said, there are multiple issues that involve them. It's not just that they are homeless. They generally have other issues of mental health and other problems that fit into this. We as a county have done what we can do, and we could always do more to provide assistance. And you do see it in certain urban settings. And one of the biggest problems we have is that we're right next to New York City. The more we in Westchester do to solve the problem, the more people will come up from New York City to say, oh, go up to Yonkers, go up to Mount Vernon and New Rochelle. they're handling the issue, and so we resolve 4 or 5 people, and then there's 4 or 5 people the next day that are there. So the problem has to be dealt with at a larger level than just what can be done in one city or one community. But I would say to the person who says, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. We're providing services, and we're dealing and interacting with those individuals within what the restrictions are of the law. And the restrictions are that I cannot force you to get out of that doorway.
But also, you know, Yonkers has borne the brunt of the homeless shelters. Yonkers now, I believe, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but Yonkers has something like 80% of the homeless population.
I don't think that's accurate.
It's
But
pretty high, though.
well, it is high. Here's the problem. Yonkers is 1/4 of the county.
Right.
So in almost every statistic you have, Yonkers has more of it than every other community. And when somebody says, well, you know, Yonkers is bearing the brunt of it, come up to Peekskill. Peekskill has a problem in Peekskill. Peekskill's just 22,000 people, and Yonkers is 220,000 people. So the problem is more visible, and it's more visible when it's concentrated. If it's concentrated in Getty Square, people see that. They don't see it in a suburban community where you may have 2 or 3 people in that level in another place, like a Portchester. And you know, folks who live in a community, they're conscious of what's happening in their community. So in Yonkers, we do have an issue. We have an issue in Mount Vernon, we have an issue in New Rochelle, proportionate to the relative sizes of the community. I've worked, you know, I've been in touch with Mayor Spano and his people constantly on these issues, and where we have the ability to work with them, to partner, to try to relieve them, we do. We have more affordable housing in Yonkers. You have more units in Yonkers, you know. So if somebody says, well, you're dumping them in Yonkers, I can show you where we build affordable housing in lots of different communities. Greenburgh, 75 units of affordable housing in Greenburgh. But once again, the need is greater than the supply. So we're doing as much as we can. And again, you know, you point to the higher levels of government, particularly the federal government, and you say, what can you do to help make that happen? So what's my job? If I go to the federal government, how do I make the federal government respond with more resources necessary so that more can be done? And it's difficult. You know, it's not an easy question. Yeah.
Yes, one more question.
Yeah.
A big problem for Westchester County, and I think the country, is shoplifting. There is a lot of stores that are closing down because they cannot maintain it open because they are losing money. How do you see that problem, and how would you address it?
It is a growing problem, and the growing problem is the brazenness of the shoplifting. It's, you know, somebody say, well, you know, this person was poor and they're in need, and so they took something in order to survive. You're watching gangs of people do it on purpose, and they're doing it in the shoplifting because it's a profit. They're part of a ring of people that can market the stolen goods. They're not taking a banana to eat it in the street. They're going into a high-end store. They're grabbing purses, which they know can be sold in the, you know, on the underground market for $1,000. You know, a discounted Louis Vuitton, I don't know that stuff, but you know, that type of thing. The state has just passed some new laws.
That was Shelley. We had Shelley on yesterday. Yes.
Shelley Mayer,
Yes.
Andre Stewart Cousins in their house, and in the lower house, Gary Pretlow, Mayor Sage, passed some new laws. I don't know, they're not implemented yet, they're not in effect. And what those laws do will provide some additional assistance for us to be able to prosecute those that do those things. But I have to tell you that we now have to work with retailers to reconstruct the way their operations are existing. You walk into a store where the counter's in the back of the store, and you know, you can walk through aisles of product before you get to the back counter. You know, that allows someone to come in, grab, and go. And how much security a particular store can have is limited to their economics. And in some cases, they close the stores.
But Shelley Shelley Mayer did mention yesterday in the interview that business owners will be given assistance. I don't remember if it was tax credit or direct monetary assistance for security in the store, to upgrade the security, which is very, very, very important. Because if you have an ice cream store, not an ice cream store, but if you have a sports goods store that's getting ripped off all the time, and you can't afford to hire extra security, now, based on this new law, you can do it. And this is a huge, huge help to people who have stores and are getting getting merchandise stolen all the time.
And that's the exact example of how this new legislation, we have to analyze and determine what does that change in the way we operate in working with them. We've had a good relationship with the local chambers of commerce all across Westchester County. We established that. It didn't exist, in prior administrations, and that relationship will help us figure out how to implement this in a way that's beneficial. I also think, to some extent, that there are things that happen in society that you can't blame government for per se. What you're watching is a degradation in a society where people are growing up and they just don't want to follow rules. They want to behave the way they want to behave. And when you have that, at all different levels, from low-level objections to high-level objections, you're watching that we, the people, are the reason why some of these things are happening. And I'll give you a benign example. When you're driving on the street, how many times do you hear people honk their horn? For minimal, they're irritated when they honk the horn. So we have a law that says you can only honk the horn when there's a serious reason, to it. But people do it all the time, and so there's a matter of public education that you can't possibly enforce the law all the time. But you have to try to impress upon people that this society will break down if people don't understand that these rules are created, for a common basis. What happens when a store has enough pilfering? They close down. They leave a neighborhood. That neighborhood is without the benefit of the supermarket. That neighborhood is without the benefit of a clothing store. Why? Because some number of people wanted to take it, something that's not theirs to take, and everybody suffered. So everybody in the neighborhood has an interest in making sure that we reduce this problem, not just put in more security, Mr. Businessman, have more security on the street, Mr. Government official, but the populace in general. Don't look as if it's a Robin Hood situation. Oh, I got into that store and I stole this and that and I didn't have to pay for it. That's not a good thing. That's going to hurt the neighborhood. And that has to be part of what we do as well, that type of public education.
Just one question here about guns and gun laws. John Palmerton asked, why do you want to ban gun shows?
Well, we took the gun shows out of Westchester County Center. Those gun shows, we felt, advanced a culture of guns that affects some people in a positive way, but some people in a negative way. And in addition to that, there were Confederacy and Nazi memorabilia that came as part of that. To have the gun show was to basically say the gun culture is desirable, and we don't want to make that statement. Now, nothing we did restricts your right to have a gun. You have a constitutional right to have a gun. There are certain procedures established by the state of New York that you have to go through if you want a handgun. If you want a long arm, the procedures are a lot different. But the proliferation of guns in this community has caused tragedy after tragedy. That's the reason why we de-emphasize it. It may not be to the person who's asking the question something in their world. They may see it as, I own guns, I like having guns, I'm a responsible gun user. That's fine. I'm a responsible car driver. I follow the rules of the road. But if enough people don't follow the rules of the road, then you change the process of legislation and you restrict certain things because most people aren't doing something that's right.
But George, he's got a point there, because the focus is, okay, so you ban gun shows, but at the same, you ban gun shows, but at the same time, let's say that, a kid gets picked up in Mount Vernon with a 38 and he just gets a misdemeanor charge. So how do you reconcile?
Well, I don't reconcile because there's different decision makers. Right. What you're going back to is the bail laws again, and that's a state level construct. The question asked to me was, why did I ban gun shows at the county center? And I gave the answer to that, which is I don't want to advance the gun culture. I'm not the governor of the state to then say, here's my policy on this as well. The question was something that was in our sphere. When I served in the state legislature, I voted for the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act bans sales of AR-15 platform automatic weapon. Now, some would say, well, I have a right to have whatever weapon I have. The Constitution gives me that right. You could argue what the Constitution was written for in the days of having a musket and protecting yourself from wild animals or someone that might do damage to your home. But, a multiple magazine weapon is not for hunting. It's not for personal protection unless you have 10 ninjas coming to attack your home. If you have it for target practice, fine, but the potential of that AR-15 on the wall in the wrong hands is devastating. We saw that at Sandy Hook. A woman had a gun on the wall. Her son was not right. He killed her, he took the gun, he went to the Sandy Hook Elementary School, and he killed a bunch of defenseless little children. And so the question becomes, do you regulate guns in some reasonable way? No one is banning guns. No one is saying guns, you can't have possession of guns. No one's saying that. No one's taking away your guns. But certain types of guns shouldn't be available. Would you give people the right to have a surface-to-air surface-to-air missile in their private possession? No. You shoot down an airplane or a helicopter, why would you have that? Well, because in case there's a revolution and I want to be part of it. I don't know. So there are reasonable gun regulations. A reasonable gun regulation is a background check. Do a background check before you sell somebody. A waiting period, not a 5-year waiting period, a waiting period of a period of time. You go in, you buy, you do the background check, you pass the background check, you have no evidence of criminal activity. Here's your gun, sir, you paid the money, you know who you are, you got a permit, fine. Now you have the gun. There's been opposition by the NRA to having background checks, which I think most people think is a reasonable expectation. So that's really where the issue is today. To try to reduce this love of guns that exists in a society, which for some people affect them, and they get the gun, and they want the gun to somehow equalize their feelings of inferiority, or you're not going to mess with me, I've got a gun, and it ends up with a dead person. And that's what we're trying to minimize.
But you defend somebody's right. You defend a reasonable licensed homeowner to have a gun.
Of course. I mean, it's perfectly legal, and we've done nothing. I've done nothing in my career to take that away from an individual. That's part of, going back to what I said earlier, the rhetoric of culture war. The person who wants no gun controls at all argues that the person on the other side of the argument wants to take away your guns. You can take away your guns. You have a right to have them under certain realistic circumstances. And by the way, if I don't inspect my car, they're going to take away my car, right? If I'm driving around with an uninspected car and I get hit for it, you get a problem. So, long story short, I think in most issues, I try to be reasonable and balanced in things. Not perfect, I make mistakes, but I'm not here to give you rhetoric. I'm here to try to figure out what is a practical result that will help make the society better. Keeping an AR-15 gun off the street, not having a gun show that motivates you to really fall in love with guns, I think are reasonable things. At the same time, you still, by all reason, have the right to go through a procedure and to own a handgun, long arms, things that would protect you or allow you to hunt or target practice, whatever those things are.
Well, we've covered a lot of topics, so I think we're getting down to our final question. In the event that Donald Trump becomes president again, have you given thought to how you would be able to work with him? Let me rephrase it. If Donald becomes president, how are you going to get things done?
Good question. Ancillary to that question is who controls the House and who controls the Senate. If there's a Republican president, but there's a Democratic House or a Democratic Senate or both, those are all different permutations. Basics are this. I've served in the state assembly in the majority. I've served in the state senate in the minority. I've served under a Republican governor in the state, George Pataki, and then I've served under Democratic governors during my tenure. I have been a county legislator when I had a Republican majority of the legislature, a Republican county executive, and then I've served under a Democratic executive, and then I became a Democratic executive with the Democratic. You adjust to the circumstances of the moment. I don't support Donald Trump. I understand some people love him beyond all sanity, and that's their prerogative. That's why I laugh when somebody says, "Oh, MAGA," because everybody knows that's not where I'm at. However, you then deal with the fact that you work through your conference. There's a Democratic conference. Hakeem Jeffries is the leader of that conference. I served with him in the state assembly. He's a very bright guy. He's a very good leader. I hope to vote for him for speaker, and I hope he becomes the Speaker of the House. If he does, then he will lead the Democratic majority in the House, and I would expect to be a solid, productive member. I'll have my priorities. What did I say? Affordable housing, jobs, climate change, transportation, things that I can focus on that I think I can deliver back to the 16th District. And then as we deal with Donald Trump, who won't do this, who won't do that, if that's the case, then we'll react off of that. If we wind up in the minority situation, we'll still support and propose good bills. And then I think we'll vote no on things that we don't believe are good public policy. I've done it before. This is not new to me. It may be new that somebody doesn't know me. Somebody in the Bronx doesn't know me. There's any number of people who don't follow what happens at the state legislature or the county government, so they don't even know, oh, who's this guy George Latimer. But, you know, I've proven already exactly what my mindset is. And we've just had this conversation, better part of an hour. I am a reasonable person. I don't project myself as a genius. I think, have much arrogance, but I have some confidence in what I do. What I offer voters is an opportunity for a different strategy in your congressman. If you don't like what I'm offering, have the alternative. There's an incumbent, you vote for the incumbent. But if you think that the way we've operated in representation for the last 4 years hasn't gotten you what you want, I offer that alternative. And I think I'm a viable alternative. I have a record that proves it.
There you have it, folks. Thank you so much for sending in your questions. It's very important. It's always important to hear from you. And hopefully George has answered your questions. If you have additional questions, I am sure you can email him or you can call. He'll be busy while he's running for congressional office, but he is a candidate. And thank you, George.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much, Ben.
And don't forget, guys, if you are in the mood for a good Mexican food, Dos Marias at 200 New Main Street in Yonkers, it's the place to go. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, Yonkers Voice is not our voice. Yonkers Voice is the platform where your voice is amplified and heard. We connect you and those who seek elected position, like Mr. George Latimer and others. Thank you for watching, and until next time.